Hi, I'm Carol Salva, and I'm an education consultant with Seidlitz Education.
Hi, I'm Tina Beene, and I'm also an educational consultant with Seidlitz Education, and I have the great fortune of being a colleague of Miss Carol Salva. Today we're going to talk to you guys about achievement for English learners in social studies with effective questioning. And we're really excited to bring you guys this topic. It's something that's really important to both of us, and we're very passionate about the work that we do for English learners. So we wanted to take just a second to tell you a little bit about ourselves and why we do the work that we do.
Right, just quickly, I am a teacher. I'm actually coming out of the classroom, and I teach high school right now, and I teach newcomers. I've written a book with Anna Mattis called Boosting Achievement, which is about reaching students who may have missed formal education. And so I'm very excited today to be working with Tina because I use a lot of social studies in my English, in my ESL classroom.
Awesome. So I'm excited about this opportunity because teaching social studies to English learners is my passion. I'm so excited about the opportunity to share some strategies with you guys and ways that we make this work for English learners because this content area is absolutely essential. One of the reasons why Carol and I are both so passionate about working with English learners is we believe that all children deserve the opportunity to have a quality education and that the language they bring to the classroom when they first arrive should not be a deterrent to overall academic achievement. So we want to make it possible for you and your students to be successful even as they're acquiring the English language. So when you're working with English learners, time is of the essence. So we've chosen a strategy to share with you today that works in the classroom regardless of how much time you've got. If your kids can talk, they can do this. The strategy we're going to share with you today is called QSSSA. This strategy works for students of all ages. I personally have shown this strategy and used this strategy with pre-K children, terrifying experience. Just the pre-K children themselves, not the strategy. And with adults, I've even used it in non-educational contexts with varying degrees of success. My family does not take direction well. But also, it's very, very simple. This is something that as soon as we explain each of these steps to you, you'll be able to replicate this with success in your classroom as soon as you return there.
Right. Now, we're also very proud that it aligns directly with Dr. Echeverria's keynote address. We had the opportunity to watch that. She lays out essential components for supporting English learners, and this strategy is right in alignment, and we're going to take you through each of those.
Isn't that exciting? You already did some professional development that taught you, or you probably did. If you haven't watched it, go watch it too. It's great. It gives you that opportunity to say, okay, I understand now why, and I understand what, but how exactly do I achieve these goals and pay attention to these concerns? And the QSSSA strategy is the answer. And finally, it's going to make you look like the rock star teacher that you are. This strategy solves for many of the struggles that we experience in the classroom, issues like wait time, using full sentences, getting students to share, is solved for in this structure so that you can focus on why you went to college and got that degree and show up to do this job every day.
Okay, so the alignment to her keynote, and we really appreciate Dr. Echeverria for doing the keynote. Just like Tina said, if you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it. But this is how QSSSA directly aligns to those issues that she said we should consider.
First of all, this strategy helps you maximize your instructional time, right? You're pre-planning those essential questions, making sure that students are discussing the topics that are essential for the day. This ties back to your content objective, right? These questions are designed to help ensure that students have taken away what it is you wanted them to learn from that day's lesson. It combats that wasted time that it can occur if you're just thinking on the fly. You may give students too long to talk, not enough time. It also addresses many of the opportunities students might have to choose maybe behaviors that wouldn't be in their best academic interest. Those are kept to a minimum throughout the pace of the activity.
Now, this questioning strategy also specifically helps you scaffold for language development. That's what we're talking about with this conference, are our English learners and students who have varying degrees of language proficiency. So built into the strategy is a support and a scaffold for all of those students.
The strategy also gives you the opportunity to both model and practice academic language. So we're following that gradual release pattern of I do, then we do, and then you do, and we're practicing those language structures that are essential for students to internalize the language and increase their language proficiency.
And finally, just like Dr. Echeverria said, we know that getting to know our students is foundational to supporting them. So built in with this strategy is the opportunity to open a space to learn more about your students. We want to make sure that we're using their names, just like she said. That's very important when you're calling on students. But we also want to walk around and listen when they're having structured conversations. It's not only giving me valuable feedback, it's also letting me learn more about each individual student, the way they think, and just about them.
All right, so let me take you through the strategy as if you were already in the classroom, already proficient at using it. This is what it would look like. First, there's a question that's posed. In this example, what was the primary reason the Missouri Compromise was drafted? That's an essential question for the day. I want all of my students to come up with their own answer, so they're going to stand when they can complete that sentence. When they have their own answer, they're just going to simply stand silently. Using the stem that's provided, the Missouri Compromise was drafted primarily because each student's going to be prepared to give their own answer. Students will share in some type of structured cooperative way. In this example, we're going to begin with person number 1, right? We've numbered off our groups, and after each person speaks, they're going to immediately sit down. And the reason I've chosen this particular share is it allows you to have a visual cue for the conversation and the pace of the conversation throughout your room. In case you've got one student like me who will take the floor and never give it back, you're not going to hear from Carol the rest of this time. It's mine now. That student is forced to relinquish control when it becomes obvious through the visual that they are still talking and everyone else is 3 or 4 people ahead, right? And then finally, we're going to assess in some type of way, such as a seating chart showdown, right? Where I'm going to call on one student from the seating chart, just pick a number, call a student. That student's going to share their answer in a complete sentence or their partner's answer, and then they're going to get to pick a different number. And when they pick that number, that student's going to respond using one of these stems or in their own way in a complete sentence in order to share their understanding. And we're going to have that formative assessment piece.
So here are the reasons that QSSSA are effective. These are the sheltered strategies that are research-based that are built in when you use this questioning strategy.
Okay, first of all, you're asking an essential question that has some depth to it, some nuance, something the students need to discuss and understand. So that high yield question is an essential part of your conversation in the classroom.
Right, that's directly aligned to your content objective for the day. Now the signal is what builds in wait time. I don't know about you, I'm not so great at wait time. And research shows that we don't, across the board, we're not giving students that time that they need to think before speaking. So we want every child to be able to speak, and we want every child to have the opportunity to come up with an answer. And wait time is the only way to do that. So give me your thumb up or stand up or sit down when. That's the opportunity with the signal. That's the reason the signal is so important.
And then when students are going to speak to a partner, we want them to use a full sentence and we want them to practice that academic vocabulary. So we're going to give our students some type of sentence starter or sentence structure so that all students can respond in a full sentence. This is essential because some of your students are going to walk into your room with the ability to form a complex sentence with a couple of subordinate clauses on their own. It's going to be amazing, right? And some of your students are going to walk in and they're going to have the same knowledge, but not the ability to express it in that way independently. So the STEM really levels the linguistic playing field. It makes it possible for all of your students to respond in a way that is validating and that builds their academic language.
Absolutely. Now, the sharing piece is how students are going to respond using that STEM. And that's going to look different from classroom to classroom, even from class period to class period. Some of my classes where I have students who are very new to the language, I'm going to have them share in a much more safe way, maybe just with a shoulder partner, and I'm walking around listening for it to sound a certain way. And then as they become more proficient or I have a positive classroom culture, we might be doing more things where they're sharing in order, like the one that you suggested.
Right. And then finally, we're going to assess in some way. As the teacher, it's important that you have that opportunity after the share time that you randomly choose students, right? Where they're going to be voluntold. They're not going to volunteer, because the same 2 students who have been volunteering in your room this year volunteered last year in their previous class, and the year before that, and the year before that, right? I know that because I was one of those students. And I basically had my hand in the air like this from the second day of kindergarten until I graduated from college, right? It was great. So I understand. Socially limiting, but academically very successful. So if when I randomly choose students to share, that means all students feel obligated to engage in the share step prior to the assess, because all students know they can't just turn to me and have me answer for them. They're going to have to come up with their own answer, or everyone can write their response. But there's that accountability piece that's built into the assess component that is absolutely essential. So let's talk about what this looks like in terms of differentiation in the strategy. My newcomers and my beginners are going to be able to speak a full sentence after they have had the opportunity to work with a partner. However, I don't want to call on those students in the assess component and put them on the spot to answer in front of the whole group unless the student is willing and eager to do so, right? As a newcomer or as a beginner, it's appropriate to offer the opportunity to opt out of sharing in front of the whole group, as long as the student is able to say the sentence to you and to their partner, right? Because we don't want to put our students who are newcomers or beginners in a state of fear. We don't want them to think that they might be put in a position where they could be embarrassed in front of their peers or forced to try to demonstrate a language proficiency that's not yet a reasonable expectation for them, right? So I always gave my newcomers and my beginners the opportunity to, if I call your name randomly in an assess piece, you can just shake it off like a bad pitch. You can just say, no, I'm not throwing that. I'm not doing that. And as long as you could say the sentence to me, that was sufficient. Now, what about your intermediates? Depends on what kind of intermediate I am working with. Is it a student who is a long-term intermediate who might need a little bit of a linguistic push? Then I'm going to make sure that that student is using vocabulary and make sure I go back and emphasize the need to use the full stem when they share out in the whole group. Now, for my advanced and nearly fluent students, I'm going to be able to group those 2 together in this strategy. Not all the time, but this time I can, because really they're just speaking, which is one of, we know that is one of the easier domains of language for students to be able to demonstrate proficiency early on. So they're going to sound more like their non-English learning peers. So I don't really need to make any accommodations or modifications for them. Okay, really quickly, let's just take a quick look inside the Teaching Social Studies to ELL's resource. Within the resource, we think it's really important that we differentiate each of the activities so that students can be successful. So we want you to see what it looks like if you're doing, for example, just a warm-up, right? Just any type of warm-up activity. If we're going to uncover this picture, for example, and show just the top third, then 2/3, and then the full photo, I still want to differentiate for language levels, because not all of my students have the same proficiency. So I don't have the same sentence stem in this situation. If you can see, you have different stems depending on the language level. And then finally, you see in the academic conversations from the resource that we break down exactly what is expected for beginners, intermediates, advanced, and highly advanced students so that you can be cognizant of that when you're planning.
One of the things I like about this, Tina, is I haven't seen, I know we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but I haven't seen that differentiation in a lot of resources. So I appreciate that you gave us this so that people can take a screenshot of this and they can apply this even if they don't have your resource.
Absolutely.
They can see how, even within a questioning strategy, you can differentiate for different language levels.
Right, just take your own proficiency level descriptors, whatever that looks like wherever you are, right? Because everybody likes to do it their own way. But however you are measuring students' language proficiency, make sure that your content in your classroom is delivered in such a way that it's respectful of those proficiency levels. So that's what we've tried to do here with this resource.
So we're adding in some book snaps. I want to shout out to Tara Martin, who came up with book snaps, and a lot of folks out there on social media are using these. These are both from Boosting Achievement. I wanted to underscore the fact that we included a lot about QTripleSi because this is what is the reason that our newcomers and our underschooled students can participate in mainstream classes. Throughout the year, they are gaining more English. They understand more than they can speak. And so they might opt out. You might allow them to shake it off in the beginning, but then after that, you're going to see those students getting more and more confident because they've had a chance to think and they've had a chance to talk with each other before sharing out. So now Tina and I are back together, albeit remotely. We want to talk to you now specifically about social studies.
So when we were exploring this strategy, specifically exploring QSSSA together, we were really getting into the specific components of QSSSA, how it looks in your room, and how it can be executed. But I wanted to take a minute and step back and explore the idea of questioning in general. Why is the questions that we ask and the way that we ask them, why is that so powerful in the classroom, and why is it so impactful? And specifically in social studies, and even more specifically for English learners. So we're going to break down each of those questions. So for example, why is questioning so powerful? When you ask a question that causes a student to think, because unfortunately, every question that we ask doesn't currently do that. When we ask a question that requires someone to think, we take their brain from a passive state to an active state, right? So that immediately increases engagement. I am more emotionally invested, I am mentally invested when I'm considering the question. If I ask a low level or comprehension level question and I immediately let someone answer, then I'm just getting baseline information, right? And basic information from the student who processes most quickly. If I want all of my brains to have a chance at answering a question, it has to be something they want to consider and something they can be successful in answering. Once I've increased that engagement and my students are not passive learners, but are actively wondering and questioning, then I've cultivated curiosity. And finally, I believe questioning is so powerful because it fosters doubt. It makes you think about the things that you think you know and wonder, do you really know them? Is that really true? And for a lot of our students, they come to us with kind of a binary mindset. And that's normal, right? What I believe is right and what you believe, if it's different, is probably wrong. So when I have a classroom where students have to talk about why and how things came to be and why they think what they think, then it opens that door for maybe I don't know as much about this as I thought, or maybe I'm not as sure as I thought I was. I better get some more information. I better consider this issue from multiple perspectives. And I think that that is such a powerful mindset to have, and it really opens their brains up just for education in general. Through these questions that we ask and these conversations that result, our students end up exploring their relationship to social studies or to history in general. If you've worked with adolescents for any length of time, you know that everything that happened on this planet before their birth was prologue. Everything was leading up to their birth. All of the events were set in motion so that they could be born. It's really hard to consider anything that happened before you existed as really being relevant to you because we're so self-centered at that age. And it's no fault of their own. We were all the same way. So we have to get kids to see their life in the context of these big historical events. How did World War II impact my story? And I don't know that just off the top of my head. I have to do some research. Who in my family was involved? Did we move as a result? The thing is, this is where my partner Carol really shines because her classroom is full of kids who have the most amazing stories that have been impacted by world events and shaped by culture and shaped by migration and shaped by war and shaped by strife. And that's such a powerful tool to use and bring into the classroom for the other adolescent students who can say, well, this is my story and this is how these events that we're studying have impacted me. So I want to shut up for a second and let Carol actually get a word in edgewise so she can tell you a little bit about how this has looked in her classroom and why we both are so passionate about bringing this content area to life.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate that. But and it has. This is what I was saying at the beginning of the presentation. That I'm powerful. I'm powerful.
You are powerful, Carol. You're so powerful.
I'm passionate about using social studies in my ESL classroom, or even when I taught ELA, when I was the language arts teacher, because those thematic units, it's exactly what you're saying. Everyone has a story. I love that the students that I teach, and remember, I teach students who are new to the language and sometimes new to education. And their stories are powerful. I know you spent some time with us, with my classroom. Every child's story is powerful. These kiddos sometimes, though, feel marginalized.
Right.
Like they may not realize how powerful their stories are. So when you can connect world geography, current events, there are overarching themes in all of these units. And I'm not teaching social studies in my ESL or my ELA classroom. I'm using social studies to teach ELA or to teach ESL in exactly the way that you're saying. And so this questioning strategy, it reminds me to have the students think a little bit before they respond and make those connections. And we know those nonfiction themes come up over in the ELA assessments. So even if you just wanted to look at it from a purely assessment standpoint, but we're not. We're looking at it as how these students relate their lives, like you said, the me part, to this content. Why is it important? And it's so important and it's so connected and they're so with you if you look through the lens that you're helping us look through, Tina.
Oh, thanks, friend. Yeah, and it's also, it helps them see the relevancy of studying something that happened 200 years ago, 300 years ago, centuries ago, and then seeing how those same themes have been repeated throughout human history, how we engage in the same behaviors and we make the same mistakes again and again, but we can also see progress over time. So for me, that's also helpful when sometimes I think, oh, like there is still so much injustice in the world, right? There's so many things that are just patently unfair in the way in which, we live our lives. But I can look back and say, wow, 100 years ago, I was pretty much straight up property. Like I've made some gains since then. As a society that I live in, we've made some gains since then. So it helps me keep perspective that over time we are moving forward, we are making progress. And that's also something our students really need to hear as well, that the world is becoming a better place. And we don't know that unless we look at where we've come from.
I think that's a great point. And I love this next slide that you're sharing with us about why QTripleSi is essential for our English learners. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right?
Right. So when we use QTripleSa, we allow all of the powerful parts of questioning to come through for our English learners, and we remove a lot of the barriers to comprehension and engagement and participation that might prevent us from really hearing their story. So by using QTripleSa, we allow our English learners to focus on the content and the concept and the conversation at hand instead of being stressed about the instructions and the process. Because when you are in the classroom as a student, as much as you care about the content, you really care about the social ramifications and the social interactions of your classroom experience as much as, usually more than, the academic content. So if I'm worried that I might make a mistake and look foolish in front of my peers, they might all do one thing and I do something else. If I'm trying to keep pace with the instructions and they're being given in multiple ways, but it's the same information, and I'm trying to process if I heard it correctly each time, I can't focus on the content when I'm in that state, when I'm trying to make sure I'm comfortable with the process and I'm not going to embarrass myself. If I feel that way, then I'm in a state of fear. And what we know from Dr. Judy Willis, who is my edu hero, love her so much. She's a neurologist turned educator, Dr. Judy Willis. Look her up. She's amazing. Anyway, what she tells us about how the brain works is, when you're in a state of fear, you can't learn. So if I'm afraid through the process, then I can't be successful with the question. So when students know, okay, first we're going to have a question, then we're going to have a signal and a STEM and a way we share and a way we assess, then they're able to move past just the basics and the pragmatics of the situation and focus on the content and have those rich conversations. So it just puts them at ease and makes the classroom a comfortable, safe place. The other thing that's so essential about the STEMs is within those STEMs, you're going to have academic vocabulary embedded. You're going to have some adverbs up in there and some unusual grammatical structures. And those STEMs are also going to do things like expose students to the concept of passive voice, because vocabulary and the voice in which we communicate about social studies is so different from the language we use in any other content area. So my STEMs in QTripleSa are the perfect place for my students to practice those language structures, right? Because they're not going to internalize them just from hearing me say them. They have to engage with that process as well, and they have to use that language.
I think that in itself is what the bigger message of scaffolding to support the success of all the learners, all of these things. And especially, it's not just academic vocabulary. It's very important in social studies because of the way that it's used and the way that they're the way that it's presented to them so that they can own that vocabulary. I agree completely.
Right. And that scaffolding gives students that opportunity to say, well, I might feel a little scared, I might be a little apprehensive, but I've got this system in place in my classroom. I'm set up for success. I know that I'm going to have to express my own idea, but then I'm going to get to express it to a partner in a low stress way. And then maybe we'll have a bigger discussion, or maybe we'll have a whole group, students randomly share out, or maybe I'll just have to write it for my teacher, but I'm going to have the support throughout the process in order to be successful. And when you're randomly assessing there at the end, students get to see other students taking risks and being successful.
So I hope that you have felt inspired by Tina's message and by what I've talked about today. You can rewatch this video many times because we went deep into the why, and we want you to know that the what, the actual steps, are not complicated. So you can go back and see the steps to the QSSSA strategy and just start trying that out. I also have videos on my site of me actually doing it with a group of students, and there's a lot of information out there. But I want to say just again, thanks, Tina, and thanks to everybody out there, and we really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.